Well, first of all, let me say good evening to you. I am Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, Super District 7 Commissioner here in DeKalb County, Georgia. And I would like to thank you for attending our very first HOA retreat. I would like to say to my co-host, Mr. Lance Hammonds, thank you so much. Shall I say, this town hall or this retreat was developed out of a general conversation that we had one day. And it was actually pre-COVID. And this should have been a half-day retreat where I would have served breakfast and all those wonderful things, so that we could have explored everything from municipal codes, of which we'll talk about, because one of the things that I've found since becoming an elected official is that it is so important to educate all of our constituents so that they understand the importance of codes and ordinances, because the wrong time to find that you don't have proper codes, or shall I say a code that may be contrary to what you believe, is when you rely on it. So today we'll talk about everything from noise ordinances to high grass. And I do not believe for this presentation we, as we generally do, had an introduction and bio for everyone who is participating. But I will allow each and every person that is a part of this conversation to briefly introduce themselves, and then we will not delay. We will move right into the presentation because we have a lot of ground to cover this evening. So Mr. Matthew Williams, I'll go ahead and let's start with you.
Good evening, my name is Matthew Williams. I am the zoning administrator for the Department of Planning and Sustainability.
And Mr. Tyson, well, Officer Tyson, I should say.
Yes, I'm Officer Tyson. I work at South Precinct. I've been serving the community for 18 years.
Thank you. Major Banks.
Hi, my name is Major Ken Banks. I'm the commander for South Precinct, providing service DeKalb County for approximately 28 years now.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson.
Good evening. I am Tracy Hutchison. I'm the director for Sanitation and for Beautification. And I also would like to introduce my great superintendent, Ricky Crockett, 20 years with the DeKalb County. And I've been with the county for 16 years.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Tim Hardy.
Hello, my name is Timothy Hardy. I am the Deputy Director for Code Compliance for DeKalb County. Code Compliance enforces all of the Code of Ordinances for the county. I am relatively new to DeKalb, a little over 2 years, but I've enjoyed my time here so far, and I look forward to giving you guys some information tonight.
Thank you. And Ms. Chandran Pemberton.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me this evening. It's a pleasure. Again, my name is Chandran Pemberton and the owner of PL Solutions. It's a brokerage firm, work in the area of property management. So we manage those HOA and condo communities throughout the metro area. Pleasure to be.
Absolutely. And Ms. Pemberton actually manages our HOA. And we also have my co-host this evening, Mr. Lance Hammonds. So Lance, if you would give an introduction as well.
Hey guys, I'm Lance Hammonds, chair of the Rockbridge Coalition. I live in the Water's Edge subdivision over in the southeast corner of District 7 and 4. And glad to be here. We're going to get some good information tonight, and we're going to get organized, and we're going to participate in our government. So this is going to be really good.
Absolutely. And Allison, without delay, if we can go into the slides. The first thing we're going to answer, because many people, and just this week, I had a situation where Ms. Hutchinson, as a matter of fact, was involved relating to sanitation, got a call that there had not been a pickup. When we delved into the matter, what we found is that because of cars being parked along the road and us having one of our side loader trucks entering into the community, we were unable to service the homes because our truck could not make it down the street. So when I spoke with the constituent and we had tracked down what the issue was, I said, you know, perhaps it'd be a good idea if your homeowners association would send out proper notice to all of your residents do not block the streets with your vehicles because we plain and simply cannot move them. And the gentleman said, we don't have an HOA and we don't understand how to go about organizing one. So one of the first things that I wanted to do is, first of all, to make sure we are, operate on the same sheet of music, is define what an HOA is. And an HOA is nothing more than a homeowners association. And it's an organization often of subdivisions, whether it's communities, planned condominiums, and they make and enforce their own rules for residents. And those who purchase properties within that HOA, they become subject to whatever the rules and regulations may be, as well as any HOA fees that are associated. As a general rule of thumb, HOAs are going to enforce your municipal codes and your ordinances. And at this time, we have a very brief video. Some of this is very relevant. You will notice they will use the term planned unit development. However, when you hear that term, just think in terms of your communities and subdivisions. So Allison, if we could go ahead with that video at this time, that would be wonderful.
Think you know how this is going to go? Before you buy a property in a community with an HOA, there are 9 things you should do. Number 1, learn its rules. Look online, ask your real estate agent, or contact the HOA directly. Pay close attention to fines and the HOA's capabilities. Can it foreclose on your property if you don't pay your dues? 2, make sure the home you want to buy is not already out of compliance with HOA regulations. Buying into a problem will be a headache. 3, assess environmental practices. HOAs may require fertilizers, pesticides, sprinklers, and whatever else it takes to keep your lawn green. It may forbid xeriscaping and limit garden size. 4, consider your temperament. If you hate being told what to do, HOAs may frustrate you. 5, find out about fees. How are increases set? How often do they occur and by how much? 6, try to get a copy of the minutes from the last meeting or sit in on one. You'll hear what conflicts arise and how they're resolved. HOAs have lots of politics and drama, so be ready. 7, watch for undermanagement. With some HOAs, no one really cares. No one maintains buildings or takes the board seriously. Residents may be randomly appointed to preside over it, so be ready for that. 8, find out what catastrophe insurance the HOA has on the buildings. Homes in areas prone to floods, fires, and other disasters are especially in need of the right insurance. And 9, consider the impact of HOA fees on your finances. High HOA fees on a condo may cost as much as the house you don't think you can afford.
That as a general rule down here in the South, catastrophe insurance and so forth, flood insurance if you're in a floodplain, that's as a general rule going to be the responsibility of the individual homeowner. When we talk about high fees, depending on where you live, fees for HOAs, and if you have condominium associations, particularly in your metropolitan areas like Atlanta, you can have a monthly association fee of $500 or more, depending upon the amenities that you receive. Let's go now, if we will, Allison, directly to the slides, because the next slide that we should have in front of me looks at what can an HOA do. Let's start there. What is it an HOA can do? Let's kind of walk through these, and many condos, co-ops, and neighborhoods actually have homeowners associations. For the most part, homeowners associations are designed to ensure that you maintain your property values and that your community has best practices. The video referred to fertilizer, but some communities require such uniformity as a certain type of mailbox for all residents. It limits you in color. It may limit your ability to utilize certain types of shrubs and plants if they feel that that's necessary to maintain the integrity of the community. So we talk about all of those things. Grass cutting. I know that my HOA, we have a requirement in terms of on the trash pickup day, you have a certain window at which to put your trash can out and bring it back. And if you fail to do so, the first time you'll get a notice that you overlooked or omitted your responsibility. Second time you, will receive your fine for failure to adhere to the rules and regulations. Also general maintenance. When it comes to homes that you see in communities that have often, fallen into bad repair, HOAs can be very vocal in terms of requiring and asking HOA members to maintain the home. Also, maintain common grounds. That's in many instances, particularly at front entrances of subdivisions, as well as community areas where there may be, a utility cost that is shared, water costs that are shared if you all have sprinklers and you're watering lawns. All of those things are generally covered by your HOA, as well as levies and one-time assessments. That is a very important thing to consider, when you're joining an HOA. Now, I know personally, I lived in a community, and this goes to, I had this question arise this week from someone who said they wanted to maintain their own road. And I don't know if they really wanted to do that. Because if you put up a fence and you become a separate entity, then you are responsible for the upkeep of that particular road. And as such, if potholes arise and it requires work, then an HOA would levy you a one-time fee. And I know what that's like to have been levied in one community that I lived in, a $3,800 one-time fee that was shared amongst all residents. As well as making sure, if you all have an HOA, look at your bylaws and make sure that it outlines the responsibilities of the HOA, as well as your governing board. So Allison, if we can go ahead and move to the next slide. This is going to begin the conversation where we draw everyone else in. What are your municipal codes? Some people refer to them as muni codes. You may have heard that term used previously, but literally any borough, depending on where you live up north, you get into boroughs and townships, cities, counties, municipalities, all of those have the ability to create local ordinances. This can range from everything from noise ordinances are set generally on the local level, the height of grass, your zoning laws, buffers for development, setbacks, as well as your building codes. And as a general rule of thumb, these are all things that HOAs are going to concern themselves with and are responsible for enforcing. And Allison, let's go on to the next slide so I can stop talking and allow other people to talk.
Commissioner, can I say something here?
I'm sorry, was there a question?
This is Lance.
Okay, Lance, yeah, and feel free, you're the co-host. I just want to say, I don't want to do all the talking. We're going to get to all the panelists in here.
Okay, as we get into this, I want everybody to kind of think about this. What we're talking about really with the HOA, whether you have one or if you don't have one, what this really is about is taking control of your community. How do you want your community to look? How do you want your community to grow? And how do you move as a unit, your HOA, your civic association, and that type of thing? So I know the question comes up is that not everybody has an HOA, but really what we're talking about is neighbors organizing and working together with other neighbors. And that's what this is really all about. This is about a mindset of us taking control of our community, of us utilizing the resources that we have here on this virtual town hall meeting to get things done for our community. Because all the things that you're going to hear about tonight are going to be ways you can get engaged and help your community get better. And you need to remember this. If you don't do it, nobody else will. There's nobody coming to save your community. You got to save your community. You got to pick up the trash or make sure it's picked up. You have to make sure all these things are done. So again, I want you to think about this. Whatever problems that you have in your neighborhood, bring a solution to the table with you, and then we can work through that. So I think this is what this whole thing is about, and it leads into this discussion about how and all the resources we have available to us. So don't get hung up on I don't have an HOA or I don't. If you just come together as a group, because that's what the Rockbridge Coalition does. We came together as a group to work on some issues in our community, and really in our area we're really blessed. Our elected officials listen to us. I know Commissioner Cochran-Johnson listens to us, Bradshaw listens to us, and I believe all the rest of them listen to us. And they really listen to us if we come as a group and if we come organized. So Commissioner, I'll turn it back over to you and we can kind of go through the slides and engage this discussion.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that, that's really important for us, reasons for us to have this conversation when we talk about HOAs, again, these are our property values that we're talking about, as well as best practices in holding our own communities accountable. Because government has enough burdens independent of having to police citizens when many of these things can be done through our neighbors, through Neighborhood Watch. So Allison, let's move forward with the next slide so we can have some discussion there as well. And let's sort of keep them going because we have a lot of ground to cover here this evening. And we should be moving into the first presentation. And code compliance is the heart and core of communities. At this point, I'm going to sort of turn over the floor to Mr. Tim Hardy, whom I work with on a daily basis. I would say that the bulk of the inquiries that I receive on a daily basis relate to code compliance. And of course, we're not dealing with normal times, Mr. Hardy. I know that we are not working with, a full crew at this point due to COVID-19. But if we can bring up those slides, let's go through the presentation because I want everyone that is a part of this call to understand this evening what are our most common infractions as it relates to code compliance. So let's go ahead and start there. And I know that as a part of this conversation, as a general rule, high grass, open storage, unregistered and unlicensed vehicles, parking on unpaved surfaces, inoperable vehicles, dangerous structures, illegal signage, and also it is a requirement that your address must be posted. So let's make sure we cover all of those things. And now I'm going to turn it over to you. And I know that Beautification is also here, Ms. Hutchinson and Mr. Crockett. So feel free to have an interactive discussion at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll cover most of those things that you just mentioned. I want to start with the Code of Ordinances and how they affect or how they're different from the HOA regulations. Then I'll get into where we are with the COVID situation and how we're working daily in DeKalb. And then we'll talk a little bit about most commonly found violations. And then we'll end with some of the zoning infractions that HOAs may or may not experience. So we go to the next slide, please. So DeKalb County Code Compliance enforces the Code of Ordinances. The Code of Ordinances is a document about this thick, and it has every regulation that's passed by the county commissioners. When the county commissioners pass those laws, then they're enforced by our division. We enforce those by notice, by citation. We also take folks to court. We issue citations, and there are penalties. Those penalties can range anywhere from $1,000 a day up to 6 months in jail. Now, of course, that rarely happens for a code violation, but it certainly can. Yeah, perfect, thanks. All right, so we may issue notices, we may issue citations, we may issue stop work orders. If there's work going on at your neighbor's property and you think maybe there's a permit requirement, that'll be a good time to give us a call so we can come out take a look at it. And indeed, if there is a permit requirement, we'll stop that work and issue the proper notices. As far as covenants, the covenants are rules that are imposed by the developer or the declarant, so to speak, or those people that are in charge of that HOA. We don't enforce those regulations per se, but some of them mirror exactly the regulations we have in place with the county. So if you think there's something deficient about your neighbor's property or your property in general, please give us a call. Punishments, fines, things of that nature, fine schedules. The HOAs have their own schedules for that. So you'll have to, read your covenants, learn what those fines are and what those rules are. Sometimes the HOA will get to a point where they actually take you to court, and a judge will make a determination as to whether or not those fines or fees were warranted. Again, any warnings or letters that you receive for HOA violations will come directly from that HOA body, not from code enforcement. Next slide, please. Before I talk a little bit about how we're working during this healthcare pandemic, just wanted to point out a couple of activities that we participated in as it relates to COVID and relocating some of the homeless population along with community development, as well as passing out no mask, no service signs, and just mask in general. Next slide. Just another photo of a Saturday activity that our guys participated in to get the word out and to get the masks passed out, as well as the signs themselves to most of the commercial businesses within the county. Next slide. So to comply with the current health pandemic, we were working initially when COVID started with about 32 officers in the field. We reduced that number to about 8 officers per day. And the reason for doing that is so if any of our group got sick or were susceptible to the virus on any given day, we would not lose our entire workforce. We have a group of about 8 officers that work each day, and they primarily look at health and safety type regulations. Anything that may be considered critical or priority. Some of those are listed here below. Unsafe buildings and structures will be on the top of that priority list. Anything that may be in danger of collapsing. Unsafe equipment that may present a danger to the public. Rooming houses, boarding houses, any of those assisted living type situations where the conditions there may endanger those inhabitants. That would be on the top of our priority list as well. Sewer leaks, contamination, any kind of unsanitary type conditions that are found would be on the top of that priority list as well. Water intrusion, anytime you have a leak or water that can get into a structure, that would be considered a priority. Building without permits. So this goes directly to some of the HOA concerns, because again, if you have work activity that's happening at your neighbor's property or in any of the common areas, that's going to directly affect your property values. So again, if you think that work may require a permit or you're just concerned as to how it's being done, please give us a call. We'll come out and inspect the property. If indeed a permit is required, we'll stop the work and start that process. Closing of vacant structures, either in your community or somewhere near your community. You may observe properties that are vacant and open, have some type of overgrowth or trash around the area. That would be an ideal time to give us a call. So
and Mr. Hardy, I'm going to sort of chime in here because I'm trying to multitask and I'm seeing questions that pop up. And when we talk about vacant structures and properties that are abated, in 2019, DeKalb County demolished through demolition over 200, slightly over 200 abated properties.
Yes, ma'am.
As of March of 2020, we had only demolished 4, but it was our full expectation to have demolished just as many in 2020 as we had in 2019. Now, I always am very clear on saying that it takes a decade or longer for a property to get to the point of requiring a demolition. I noticed that Mr. Powell, and thank you so much, Mr. Wayne Powell from our Belvedere community, is a part of this conversation. And we did hire a company to catalog our abated properties and report back to DeKalb County. Also, I spent $250,000 of my discretionary funds from District 7 to revive the DeKalb County Land Bank. Now, what does the land bank do? The land bank would give us the ability to take properties that have been abated, that in many instances have existed next door to good citizens for far too long, place those properties within the land bank, cleanse the title, and then put them out for constructive use so that they're back on our tax rolls. And citizens like you could actually purchase that particular property or home. And that is very important because for a long time, and this is just so not rocket science, we have operated independent of a land bank that could end a lot of the blight that we have. So the land bank has been revived. We have not appointed all members to the board because there is a board, but would you report, Mr. Hardy, for us where we are, if you are aware, with the cataloging of those properties throughout DeKalb County that are abated? And if you have an actual number, because many of the properties that I've received calls about this year have already been condemned, and we're just waiting to go before the judge to receive the final order so that they can be demolished, so that demolition can take place. So can you speak to that for me?
Yes, ma'am. As far as the catalog, and I think you're referring to the cyclomedia
Yes.
of the derelict properties. We have finished that piece of it. Community development has that report. We are currently have some boots on the ground looking at some of the most egregious of those properties. But what we have is a robust pipeline as far as those properties that we can now move through the MREM process, or at least start the enforcement action on those. We have no less than 50 to 75 properties that have already been processed and are ready to go to the law department. If we can ever get a docket on a court date, and so we can get those properties through there either for abatement or demolition. So we have a great pipeline that needs to get to law, get to the judge, and then we need to get final orders on those properties. Yeah. So we have a lot. We just don't have the court's attention right now because they're closed, given the judicial emergency.
Yeah,
I will say that I'm really pushing for us to get back into the courts. Because, you know, I personally don't see the demolition of a home as a public safety crisis at this moment. You can put me in a bulldozer and we could do that. There was a question I noticed here that said, wanting to know whether or not investors can purchase from the land bank. Absolutely. Once we cleanse that title, any individual would have the right to make a full purchase of that property. There was another question. A gentleman said, if you suspect that someone is constructing illegally, what do you do? Just send me an email. I receive those emails, you know, all throughout the year. And sometimes it's with merit, sometimes it isn't. But once you give us a street address, it's very easy. Planning and sustainability can immediately tell me whether or not there is a land disturbance permit or a work permit that has been issued for that particular address. So just feel free to reach out and let us know. And Mr. Hardy, you just go right ahead with your presentation.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Next slide, please, Alice. Our code enforcement division is located on Cannon Road, right at the corner of Cannon and Glenwood. The physical address is 1807. Typically, during normal times, we would be open from 8:30 to 5. Well, right now, if you want to send in reports of violations or complaints, you can send them via email. You can call our 311 operator. You can call our primary number, which is 404-687-3700. You can go online and actually submit a complaint if you like. Our building is still manned with security every day. So if you just want to drop off a note with an address, feel free to do that as well. The building can't be accessed, but he'll be happy to take your note and process it through the right channels.
Yeah, Mr. Hardy, I got a question for you from the chat box. I think we'll kind of sum up a lot of the things. They've said they've called code enforcement along with other neighbors regarding a specific home in our community that is filthy. The property directly affects me because it's next door to my house. In the past months, I've had to cut trees down. They've had several litters of kittens there, snakes and rodents. What else can I do? Should they be calling your office for this?
Yes, sir.
That's a code. Okay.
That's a clear code violation as you've explained it, and we'll be happy to come out and make the inspection and follow up on it. If you have any information on who the property owner may be, that would certainly be helpful as well. Just help us do our research so we can get to that property owner faster. If there's no property owner to be found, of course, then the lifetime of that compliance matter is going to take a little bit longer. But if there's any indication that the property owner is local or can be reached, then yes, we'll reach out to them, start the enforcement action, either giving them proper notices or it actually issue citations if it's egregious.
And also let me say, I see a note here concerning properties that are being converted into multiple rental units. South and unincorporated DeKalb has had more than its fair share of LLCs form. The acquisition of properties, particularly after 2008 when we had the economic crisis, and purchasing of homes only to transfer keys to tenants. What you're referring to here when you say multiple rental units is often what we recognize as pad splits, which is an emerging trend where a homeowner will take one unit and turn it into a 4 or 5 person home. And that is not a legal practice. If you live next door to a property and based upon traffic flow, you feel that it has been converted into a pad split, again, reach out to code enforcement and we will take swift action to visit the home and make sure that they understand what our policies and procedures are, because we do not allow pad splits. And Mr. Hardy, did you have anything more as it relates to your presentation at this time?
Well, there's a lot more to the presentation, but I don't want to take up all the time. I'm happy to answer questions. It seems like that might be the best format for now, but I did want to comment on the pad split and the Airbnbs or any short-term rentals for that matter. It's particularly from an HOA standpoint. If someone within your community, if you feel like your single family dwelling or the single family dwelling within your community or next door to you is being used as a 2 or multi-family dwelling, even if they moved the family into the basement, now the basement's shut off from the top portion of the house, that's illegal. If you have more than 3 unrelated people that are living in any particular location for any extended time, that's illegal. Now, it's not illegal if you have 10 family members that are living in the same house. So that distinction needs to be made. The county defines family as 3 or more unrelated people.
And that's really important because this year there was legislation pending under the dome that would have redefined a family unit. And that was only being done by those with a special interest who wanted to perpetuate pad splits. I did see another question here. They're coming so rapidly that what we may have to do is take many of these back online. And it dealt with, and right now is not a good time for this type question because there is no normal. But we have a constituent who wanted to know what's the normal timeline in a perfect world between the time a person is cited for a violation, you come out, they are then given the right to cure, they're brought into court, and the matter is adjudicated. You know, I understand the difficulty of the question, particularly now, because we had a good system going for a while. But can you speak to that and give them the perfect world scenario because that's where I look forward to us getting back to, Mr. Hardy.
Okay, the perfect world scenario would be the complaint would come in. We would inspect the property within 3 to 5 days. Typically, there is a 15-day notice period for most violations. After that, on that 16th day, if that violation is not cured, we'll issue a citation. Citations are typically, the court dates for citations are typically set out about 3 weeks minimum, because we have a lot of citations that we have to get through the courts and get to the clerk so they can get on a docket, so as not to crowd the dockets for each week. We'll usually set it out about 3 weeks. Then it's out of our hands from a resolution standpoint, because the solicitor is now involved. Solicitor will take that case and prosecute it. And they will take it to the court. The court may deem that they want to give this violator some additional time to comply. But in a perfect world, that case would be disposed. A fine would be assessed, typically minimal fine, and the violation would be corrected. Where the delay begins is if a person comes to court, they're fine, but the violation is still not corrected. So that means we'll have to go back and recite if it's actually disposed. If it's not disposed, the court may give them another 30 days or so to fix that. So there are a lot of variables from the time you actually issue the initial notice and the case is disposed.
Yeah.
And thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's go swiftly into the next series of slides. And Mr. Hammonds, I think I saw you have a finger for a minute, or did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, the first line of defense is the people in the neighborhood. If you have an HOA, because our HOA has a code enforcement officer where they go through, not code enforcement, but they enforce the covenants of the neighborhood. And so that person goes through there. So it also goes back to talking to your neighbors. If you're organized in your community, you can walk and talk to your neighbors. And if that fails, then we go to code enforcement. So again, guys, we need to take some ownership of our neighborhoods and our communities, and we do that by being organized.
And I would like to say that I recently participated in a ambush makeover where the HOA had chosen 3 homes that they felt were not up to their standards. And that morning we arrived and the community literally cut the grass, addressed the shrubs. And when we left, it was done. And, some of the things that we must do is very unfortunate. However, when we want to maintain the integrity of our community, it becomes necessary. So that's a good point, because this is all about ownership. And if you have an HOA, ensuring that your policies are such that they're conducive to ensuring the integrity of the community. Also be very swift. I've always believed that, justice should be swift. If a home is out of compliance, immediately act to bring them back into compliance, because it sends the wrong message to the entire community. And again, Allison, let's go ahead and cue up the next presentation so that we can move along, because I want us to make sure we get through everything we have here, because there's so much ground to cover. The next area that we are going to discuss is public safety and community policing. And during this particular segment, when we talk about public safety, one thing I've come to realize as an elected official, I don't care where you live, I don't care what your color or your religious beliefs may be. People are concerned with public safety, economic development, code compliance. We all share similar interests. So in the spirit of public safety, this goes also to the core of economic development. And it's plain and simply safeguarding our community against crime, theft, disasters, and potential harm. So at this time, we have from our South Precinct with us, we have both Major Banks as well as Officer Tyson. So let's have that discussion on community policing.
Well, good afternoon, all. I'm Major Banks, again, South Precinct Commander. And community policing is a philosophy that we have embraced here at the DeKalb County Police Department for some time. I started here in 1993. And when I arrived, there was what we called a COP unit, and which was community-oriented policing. And most of you might be familiar. They rode around on bicycles and they spoke at different functions at schools and community meetings and so forth. And we are continuing that effort today. We have then actually expanded community policing to not just a particular unit, but we have the entire department that's embracing community policing. We do still have a unit with our new chief, Ramos. She has started a new community-oriented policing unit. And that unit has then gone into communities within our 4 precincts and have actually had meetings with different communities and business communities as well. And we will continue that effort. But with community policing, it was actually started by Sir Robert Peel back in the early to mid 1800s. And one of his quotes was, police are the public and the public are the police. And that kind of really sums up what community policing is all about, shared responsibility. So we all have to take part in making sure that our communities are safe. And with that, we have a slide that would kind of go into our neighborhood watch and how to start one and its importance. So we're talking about neighborhood watch and the DeKalb Police Department, how we work closely with homeowner associations and always establish neighborhood watches as well, and even community organizations. And we do that to ensure that these communities remain safe. Although our police department, we don't aid in establishing an HOA, we do still share the responsibility in deterring crime, and that is a part of community policing where we all work collaboratively together to make sure that our communities are safe. If we can move to the next slide, please. First, we're talking about neighborhood watch and how to get started. We're going to go to the next slide. I'm going to have Officer Tyson, who's our community outreach officer, to speak.
Pretty much. Hello, everybody. First of all, why start a neighborhood watch? Neighborhood watches they're very cost effective. It creates bonds between the neighbors, brings y'all close together. It also reduces crime, reduces burglaries, reduces robberies. And it also gives you a chance to partner with the police. What does a neighborhood watch do? Each resident acts as an additional set of eyes and ears. Pretty much what that means is that you are the police in your community. We're like the aftermath. You're going to see it. So when you see stuff in your community, see something, say something. I always say that to the community. It allows residents to meet their neighbors. That's very important to meet your neighbors. Also, knowing the neighbor that's in front of you, to the left of you, and to the right of you. You should know your neighbors to the front of you, to the left and to the right. I always preach that in neighborhoods. And that way, everybody will know each other. And also, it allows you to report suspicious activity. Like I said, you can report it. If you see something, say something. If it doesn't look right, please call the police. And pretty much, you go to the next slide. Getting started, the getting started checklist. So first, you got to find a person that's committed to running the neighborhood watch. That's going to be the head person. Then you're going to find some block captains. Then you got to find somebody to initiate the program. And at the least, you got to find the people in the community that's willing to do it, to set up meetings, to find some ways of communicating with emails and flyers. And pretty much just find a location to meet on a quarterly basis, I always say, and make sure you reach out to the police officers so they come out to your neighborhood watch so they can discuss the crime stats that are going on in your neighborhood.
I'd also like to add, as we're talking about neighborhood watch, if you have a community that participates in neighborhood watch, both here on the county level as well as on the state level, you can be given literature that you can distribute throughout your community. I would also suggest, and we have officers who can come in and speak to the community as a group on best practices. So I think the literature is very important and holding initially. And I think, because one thing that we deal with, crime becomes more sophisticated. Now most homes actually have some form of video surveillance. So Neighborhood Watch will assist those homeowners with home security inspections to ensure that you have the best possible equipment. One of the things that I find, and I have legislation that, I'm working on to require businesses that tend to have a high propensity for crime and violence to have cameras installed that are a certain DPI. Because the worst thing on earth is for there to be a crime committed and you sit there and we have officers looking at fuzzy footage where you aren't able to maximize the use of that video surveillance. Also, Neighborhood Watch does the distribution of crime prevention literature, community cleanups, and literally, again, and I think both officers have spoken to both major banks as well as Officer Tyson to the fact that they serve as a direct liaison to the community. And the signage is also very important. If you are a Neighborhood Watch community, it is important that you post signage, because that signage alone can be a deterrent to a criminal who's looking for an easy target. And I'll just, turn it back over to you, but I did want to make those points.
And the next slide is pretty much, I think I've already said it. Yeah, I went over those. And so the next slide, this is the Good Neighborhood Watch program. Like I said, knowing your neighbor to the left, to the right, and in front of you is very important. It allows them, like if you see somebody to your left that that you see a car in their driveway that doesn't look right, and that's not Miss Salome's car, go ahead and call the police. And that's where this technique comes in at. And that pretty much just sums up Neighborhood Watch. And these are just some of the safety tips. Like you said, information and literature that you give out at your Neighborhood Watches, just safety tips, property crime safety tips. And these are what we've experienced, gas station safety tips, because we were seeing a peak of crime in the gas stations where people are not paying attention and pumping their gas and leave their purses on the counter, on the chair, and leave their doors unlocked. So some of this literature is available for you for your Neighborhood Watch.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that slide where initially we were talking about how having a Neighborhood Watch is cost effective. Well, it can be very cost effective to you, and you're following these tips concerning not leaving things in plain view in your vehicle, such as your laptops and your phones and so forth. Your car is broken into, and these items are stolen, and they're registered in our database, and then the crime rate goes up, and then it does affect you monetarily wise for your insurance. So you'll then find that in the areas that you live, your insurance rate may be higher than others. But if we do certain things, if you're parking your car at your home, take all of those valuable items out of the car and then into your home with you. And one particular item is our firearms. We found that many tend to leave their firearms inside of their vehicle, which is really not a good idea. Take the firearm inside your house and then have a safe place to store it. Have a safe or a gun lock so that it will be safe if you have little kids in your home. But Neighborhood Watch is a very good tool. We do come out and we try to talk and educate communities on the importance of Neighborhood Watch and how it can help you and help the police in driving crime down in your area.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on this one. Neighborhood watches are good. I'm the safety committee chair in our neighborhood. And I have to say, I've been an ultimate failure at getting a neighborhood watch organized because it's hard sometimes to get neighbors to participate in that. And we just keep trying. And we're starting to use technology more. And there was a question in the chat box asked about tax credits and maybe connecting the cameras and these different systems with the police department to kind of put a network together to do that. I know that's been some discussion, but I think one thing that I've seen in our neighborhood that seems to make a difference is actively cultivating a relationship with the police precinct in your area. Our neighborhood goes out of our way to know Major Banks when he was over in East Precinct and know the officers that patrol our neighborhood. And if something pops up, we'll make a phone call. So after a while they say, okay, that's the folks over in this neighborhood calling again. I think it makes a difference if you can develop that relationship with your police precinct in your area.
And I would also like to add that for the resident who inquired about tax credits for the installation of cameras, that has the installation of security cameras or some form of surveillance has become as, shall I say, as normal as buying a home itself. It now is just almost a necessary measure to protect your home. Now, in terms of the surveillance, and I know my chief of staff is on this conversation, I believe we signed an agreement when I sat on ERTS, Employee Relations and Public Safety, with Nest cameras as well as Ring. And all of those camera systems have that same capability, where if you will register, our local officers have the ability to tap into any video from those systems. So that technology is already being used in solving local crimes. And it's my understanding that once you register, if there is an incident, you will receive either a text message or an email indicating that a crime was perpetrated at a certain date and time. And you are asked to view your camera footage. And if you see anything that you feel can be of benefit in solving that crime, to make your local authorities aware. And Major Banks, can you speak to that?
Yes, so that goes into Connect the Cab. And what we've done is, and we'll speak about the Ring camera. We have made some great strides in clearing cases with that. So those that register, just as the commissioner was saying, when there's an incident at your home and your camera then records it, when you capture that, you can then upload it and it'll come to us, and we have detectives and I'm able to see it as well. And those pictures are very helpful. It doesn't take the place of calling 911. We do need you to dial 911, but we put those together. You dial 911, we're seeing a video. Those detectives, they're able to communicate with the officers on the street. And we've been successful in capturing burglars very, very fast. And so we're very proud of that connection, that partnership that we have with our cameras. We also have other cameras that we have access to, the flock cameras. And there are many communities and businesses that have decided to get those flock cameras. And what those do, they're actually tag readers. And they we get emails. I get a lot of the emails, and they tell us whether someone is wanted or the vehicle is stolen. And it shows what camera that captured the tag. And the officers are then able to vector in on the particular vehicle and recover someone's stolen property, or apprehend a person that's wanted for a particular crime. So very beneficial for not the police, but also for the community as well.
Okay, and thank you so much for that. So you can register and make local authorities aware. And it's done by geographic location, so that if there is a crime, you will receive a text message. I know it happened here, at my home. And lo and behold, when we pull the video, there we see the young guy who's run right out of his shoes. So the technology is being utilized as it relates to solving crime. Now let's go ahead and move directly into the next presentation. I think we're moving along pretty good here. And if you'll cue that up, I'm not sure the exact order. I know we still have beautification left to go, and we also have zoning, And then we have a specialist who manages HOAs who's going to join the dialogue as well. Okay, so we are now up to beautification. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the conversation to Ms. Tracy Hutchinson, as well as Mr. Ricky Crockett.
All right, well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you again for allowing us to join in this a very good format tonight. Very good topics. And when we speak about residents being engaged and residents taking ownership of their neighborhoods, we could go to the next slide, please, Allison. Thank you. One of the things that's very, very important is presentation in neighborhoods. And if we understand with COVID, there's a lot of folks at home now, and you know, the social distancing rules and everything per the CDC. You know, if residents would like to engage in any type of cleanup for their neighborhoods, we understand that, you know, again, with the COVID, that funding could be a source of concern for residents. But rest assured that the beautification department, so if you go to the next slide, Allison. The beautification department, we do have cleanup supplies available, free. You could come get those. You could come get those supplies. We have safety vests, you know, to make sure that you got the appropriate PPE on. We have gloves. We supply the orange bags, and we supply the litter sticks also, so you don't have to bend down and touch anything. And then when that project is done, you basically can notify us, and we'll send our crews out there to pick those bags up. So anybody that's willing to participate in any type of program, we have all the supplies ready and available for you. You just need to notify us about a week in advance, and we will gather up the material for you. We would like to record your success though. So email us and tell us who you are, you know, your neighborhood name, your association name, and we would like to record your success, because every, you know, piece of paper that's picked up is a success. Every time that we could get somebody to help us out with that, we greatly appreciate it. Beautification does have in-house crews that actually handle litter. And then we also have contracts also. So if you go to the next slide also.
And Ms. Hutchinson, let me say, and you know, as your commissioner, you know, we have a cleanup that's scheduled with the Green Forest community that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Okay. If you will make us aware, I have been overwhelmed with the Stanton community and several communities. We organize the cleanup. We will create for you the flyer saying on this day, we will have a community-wide cleanup. We generally go over to Ms. Hutchinson's office. We pick up all of the supplies.
Right.
JP Phillips and I, we arrive, and my team, and you would be amazed how many people from other communities will just come out to help you pick up. So these are things that we can all do as a community. I would like to say for the record that DeKalb County spends $6 million annually on litter pickup. It is an absolute abomination that we take taxpayers' money and spend it on litter, because we do not care enough about the community that we live in to keep it clean. You know, I have just been, you know, you can't legislate morality. You can, you know, legislate traffic, and you can legislate alcohol and drugs. But what we see here, we've got to change. And, you know, it takes stiff laws, and it also takes us setting a precedent for what we expect. I've personally been at service stations, and I've literally seen a person just put down the window and drop a plastic bottle on the ground, just yards away from a trash receptacle. So I know I have personally, and we as a county have implemented a lot of educational components in the lower school system, elementary school, because we have to start early with children, instilling pride in them for their communities to keep them clean. And I'll just leave that with you, but just know that we're here to partner with you on your community cleanups. Just simply call our office, let us know the date, we'll put it on the calendar, and we will take care of those supplies.
Commissioner, There was a question in the chat box about, is the Adopt a Road program still available? There was a business owner that asked that question.
Absolutely. I have three roads at this point. And you know, please feel free to adopt a road. In all honesty, JP, I'm not sure if you're on this conversation, but he handled it. We found 3 roads that we thought were some of the most challenging, and those are the ones that we took. But yes, the Adopt a Road program is alive, and I urge communities to adopt a road in their area and just help us keep it clean. Because it's amazing to me, we can clean up one day and drive down that road the next day, and we'll see litter again. This is going to take a community effort for us to correct it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It takes everyone to be fully engaged in this with the litter. To answer your question, yes, we absolutely have Adopt a Road programs. And as Commissioner stated, I mean, she has stepped in. Commissioner is probably one of the most hands-on commissioners as far as emails and phone calls. And so very, very active and, you know, again, leading the role of making sure that we stay on top of the county cleanliness and beautification. But the beautification department, we're operating 6 days a week. We have crews, we have our in-house crews, and then we have contracts. And of course, the commissioner, she manages or presides over PWI. So a lot of those contracts are coming to her first. And then those contracts include, you know, mowing. We talked previously about the abatement homes and stuff like that. But someone has to go out there and maintain some of those properties. And that's a part of some of our contracts also. We have contractors that we actually go out there and we cut the grass. The right-of-way mowing, we have that in-house, and we have crews that go out there and do that. We have the tree trimming. So we are a big umbrella for beautification. At one point, beautification, people thought it was just, you know, we pick up litter and, but now the services is way more comprehensive. So you may see our crews riding around town doing a lot of the MARTA stops. We change out those MARTA trash cans, and we don't just change out those bags. We go around that perimeter of that shelter because we're doing everything we can, because again, every piece of paper that's picked up is a success. And so, but the commissioner is correct. I mean, we do spend a lot of money in these contracts, which is why we need all hands on deck and helping us keep the community stay clean. But visit our website for any type of cleanup supplies. If you got any questions for us or anything like that, I mean, please visit our website. And again, I am Tracy Hutchison, the director, and I have a public relations manager. Her name is Pauline Andrea. And then of course, Ricky is the superintendent. And under his supervision, we have about 62 employees, 62 employees that actually work in beautification. And you will see us out there, you know, basically with Monday through Saturday. We clean up the ramp. You would be surprised how the ramps around DeKalb County, the amount of litter when people pull up to get off the exit, that they just unload their car right there at the exit. And so we're out there cleaning those. We clean up a lot of the county. So, and then we also manage the curb bumping and sweeping also. So that's a part of our program also. But Commissioner, that is all that I had, because again, I know you got some other panelists that you want to go around with. And again, we have our contact information as the last slide. And again, please feel free to email us, our website, and then of course you can follow us on Twitter also.
Understood. And I see Mr. Charlie Holiday Wilson had a question as to, he understands the materials are provided, but can we speak to helping get individuals to perform community service? My newsletter reaches almost 39,000 people. I have been very meticulous in doing my best to create what I consider to be the best newsletter in DeKalb County, to ensure that residents are fully aware of what's happening. So if we're doing a community cleanup and I'm aware, as I said, you know, I govern the money of the residents of DeKalb County. If you will make me aware, we will create that flyer and put it in our newsletter and ask people to come out, because it takes community to make change. So you're not alone on that. Feel free to email me or call me. We're still answering phones in District 7, and we will get that done for you. If you're not, I see a question as to how can I get the newsletter? Just go, my URL is, and it's long, but it's Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson.com. And if you go there, the first thing it's gonna say is join the movement, and put your email there, and it'll start to pop in every week. I try not to inundate you, but it does have a lot of information. And Allison, if you will queue up the next presentation, I think next we have Mr. Williams, and Mr. Williams is on the legal side of things, because when it comes to zoning, you know, we get these calls about buffers as communities are being built out, and Mr. Hammonds, you know, and what are the regulations, because you know, we have developments that are happening around in certain communities. And, you know, in full, you know, transparency, sometimes for many years, things haven't always been addressed as they should have been per se. And now we've reached a critical state in many communities. And that's where our zoning becomes very important. So Mr. Williams, did you actually supply? Yes, I see we're going somewhere. DeKalb County Municipal Codes. So let's talk about these municipal codes, and at a later date, I'm going to have a municipal code workshop. Allison, everyone that joined us tonight, I'm going to transfer to you our entire municipal code file, and I want you all to read and become familiar with these codes, because we need more community input in the development of legislation that's important to the community, and we need changes in some legislation. So I'm gonna let you take it over now, Mr. Williams, and run with the ball.
All right, I'll try to be cognizant of time and keep everything swift. But good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Matthew Williams, and I am the zoning administrator for DeKalb County in the Department of Planning and Sustainability. If we can go to the next slide. So during this time, during this COVID time, we are directing everyone to our website. As you can see, this is our landing page. If you go to DeKalbCountyGA.gov/planning, it will bring you to this page here. You will be able to access everything that you will previously came down to our office in downtown Decatur for. We had everything from permitting, development services, where you get your building permits, all things zoning, all things planning, our forms and checklists, and our public meeting calendars. Now, I'll delve into a little bit more throughout the presentation. So if you can go to the next slide. So the DeKalb County zoning ordinance, an overview of it is basically it's a nuisance prevention. And I'm gonna read directly from our chapter 27. As mentioned earlier, we have a code of ordinances. The code that I enforce is chapter 27. It is the zoning ordinance. It came into effect September 1st, 2015, and it superseded the last adopted zoning ordinance, which was in 1999. There was also some overlay districts that were approved in 2017. So I'm gonna read directly from our chapter 27, which says, this chapter is enacted by the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners to promote the health, safety, moral, and general welfare of the residents of DeKalb County, Georgia, and to implement the DeKalb County Comprehensive Plan. To these ends, this chapter is intended to achieve the following purposes, and I'll just read a few, but there's about 15 or 20 or so. Well, the most important or the most standout right now would be to promote in the public interest the wise utilization of land and to protect and establish character of the both private and public property. So we do this through residential zoning, administrative, or variances, and we have a board of zoning appeals that hears variances. Say, for example, if you come in for a building permit and you don't meet the code, if you're within 10% of the requirement, you can come to me for an administrative variance, or you can go before the board of zoning and appeals if it's over the threshold that that we can do over the counter or administratively. Since we are dealing with HOAs, a lot of times a community, if you're surrounded by some vacant land or some property, and a developer or someone wants to come in and do a rezoning. This is all a public process, And I'll get to that in a couple of minutes during the presentation as well. In terms of text amendments, we've allowed for text amendments. It's either brought forth by the department or by a commissioner, and is to amend any text in the DeKalb County Zoning Code. In terms of our community councils, this is probably the most important for the HOAs to get involved with. We have 5 community councils for the DeKalb County. Each one meets every other month according to the zoning cycle. And at these community council meetings, developers come up with proposals for various rezonings, various SLUPs, which is a special land use permit, or various amendments to prior rezonings, which is known as a major or a minor modification. I touched on the Board of Zoning Appeals earlier. There's also an Historic Preservation Commission. We have, I think it's 2 or 3 historic districts in DeKalb County, and anything that happens with those districts, architectural wise, if they want to do something different to the buildings, they have to go before the Historic Preservation and get a certificates of appropriateness. And then the community councils make recommendations to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission is appointed by the Board of Commissioners, and their sole purpose is to hear rezonings, any new developments that's being proposed that would change the zoning or the future land use. If you can go to the next slide.
And let me say on that note, I know Mr. Hammonds and the Rockbridge Coalition and others that are very active as it relates to our community councils. The community council is the first line of defense for growth. If you are seeking a SLUP, a special land use permit, then you're going to go before them. And that council is a group of your peers who should have the community's best interest at heart, who will speak as to what the community feels about that development. And since, being elected, we have worked numerous times through issues, and we have taken projects to a new level, all because of being involved in communication. It's important that right now, as we grow DeKalb so that it looks like who we are, educated, professional, dignified people, there's time for us to start making some asks of people that come into our community, our developers, okay? So let's not be so quick in some instances to say no. Let's see what we can do to enhance that development so that it enhances your property value, it enhances our quality of life, as well as our community. Because development is going to take place. It's just time we start controlling that development so that it looks like who we are and creates the communities that we want. I just can't emphasize that enough to you. And if you have issues, then that's why we're here. You reach out to us as commissioners and make it known. I think my email address circulates. When it's an issue, you'll get 50 people in a day with the same email that they copy and paste, but I get it. Do what you must, because we are here to represent you. And Mr. Williams, go right ahead.
Thank you for that. The next slide shows the purpose of the comprehensive plan. As stated earlier, the zoning ordinance is to make sure that the county is developing in accordance with our comprehensive plan. Currently, we are under the 2035 comprehensive plan, and these are governed by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. All municipalities must have a comprehensive plan that's passed and approved. So as you can see from this slide, is to create an environment to protect the predictability for businesses, investment, property owners, and the general public. If you can move on to the next slide. So in our zoning ordinance, we have zoning districts from rural, suburban, town center, regional center. That is the land use. And the numbers and the zoning districts underneath, such as R100, R75, which is the residential zoning, to C1 and C2, which is our commercial zoning. And again, this information is pulled from our zoning code that's online. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, if someone wants to come in and do a rezoning, as part of our process internal, we do a compatibility to see if the development, number one, conforms with our zoning ordinance and also with the comprehensive plan. So currently, land could be zone R75 with the future land use of suburban, Someone wants to come in and do a rezoning, and the new zoning would be MR2, and the future land use would be CRC. Next slide, please. So say, for example, if a homeowner wants to do some repairs or add an addition to their home, they want to bump up a story, or they want to put a patio, enlarge their deck, anything like that, they would have to come in and get a permit. And a lot of questions we get with phone calls or with emails is, what's my zoning district? What's the minimum lot size for this acre? What's my lot coverage? How far do I have to be set back from the front setback, from the rear setback? All this information is online in our zoning code, and I just took a screenshot from it, and you can find this information on our website. Next slide, please. Again, this is a screenshot from our website. If you have any more information about the historic preservation, the Board of Zoning Appeals, our community councils, and also our sketch plats. The Planning Commission also hears all sketch plats, which is the subdivision of land. So for example, if you're next door to a large couple of acres, and if someone wants to come in and redevelop that land, they need to do a sketch plat so we can see how many units they're going to do in terms of GIS and sanitation, how the land will be laid out. They must get a sketch plat. And again, that is a public process. Next slide, please. This is our process for if you want to do a rezoning yourself. It goes from start to finish, and I see we're running low on time, so I'm gonna just let you read through that, but it's an entire process from your inquiry to it gets to the Board of Commissioners for the hearing. And again, this information is in our 2035 comp plan, and this information also is online. Next slide. And Commissioner, if I'm going too fast or too slow, just stop me and let me know if you want me to slow down or.
I understand why you're doing what you are in lieu of time, but what we'll do as usual, guys, is we'll post all of these presentations on our website so that you'll have access to them, because this is a lot of material to digest.
It is, it is.
As it relates to this zoning process, for those of you that are watching, I cannot say how important zoning is. DeKalb County in many pockets looks very disjointed. We have facades of buildings that need to be revitalized. We have communities that are in transition, and zoning is the key. It's just vital. And also, you know, Mr. Williams, this is a separate issue. I think it's time we have a new comprehensive zoning. We need to take a new look, because what used to work don't work anymore in many instances. And it would cut down on people coming in front of us asking, you know, may I, if we go ahead and just say no. It's not, it doesn't work. So I'll let you continue.
Okay, I'll try to wrap up in the next 2 minutes. So this slide here is actually the Muni Code, where you can find not only are the Chapter 27 zonings, but also all the ordinances for DeKalb County. If you simply go to municode.com and search for DeKalb County, or do a Google search for Municode DeKalb County, and this screen will pop up. Next slide. This is the current planning services webpage. This is the division that I manage as well. With our division, again, we do the Board of Zoning and Appeals, historic preservation, rezonings. Next slide. And also important tool that DeKalb County has, we have a great GIS department. So if you're ever wondering what your zoning is, simply type in DeKalb GIS in Google to google.com, and you will get this screen. You just type in your address and it'll tell you what your zoning is. And then you can relate that back to the screen I showed you earlier with the zoning districts to find out more information about your lot. Next slide. Again, we are virtually open. This is our webpage. Again, it has information where you can apply online for your permits. You can get some forms. You can check out our ordinances. And probably the most important tab here is our contacts. We each have a county laptop and a county phone since we are working remotely. So if you need to get into contact with anyone from our department, our number and email address is posted online for you to get in contact with us. Next slide. I believe that's, again, our webpage where you can find out everything that I mentioned in the presentation. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. I did see one a quote, or shall I say a statement concerning dollar stores. And for the record, I would like to say we have a moratorium against dollar stores. I carried that water cooler. I was elected and started serving January of 2019. February of 2019, I was sitting in the legal department, and it took until October, and it literally became a national fight. I was able to get on CBS Sunday Morning quicker than I was able to pass the legislation or present the ordinance to stop the build of dollar stores. Now, if you see a dollar store that is going up at this moment, it is because they had been issued a building permit prior to October of 2019. When we say dollar stores, the moratorium that we have is against box stores in general. Those are your stores that's 10,000 square feet or less is a general rule of thumb. But nonetheless, we are addressing box stores and the effect that they have on our community. And I agree, they are not economic development. We need growth, but not certain types of businesses. Last thing that I'd like to say to that is, you know, Mr. Hammonds, it's a delicate balance when we talk about growth. Because, you know, I do receive the emails where we'll say, you know, I want a Starbucks or I want a Chipotle, or, you know, you'll be very specific in what you want. And I understand that, and so do I. But when it comes to businesses locating in communities, I don't care what model you use or who you speak with. There's two things that's going to primarily tell you immediately whether or not you can attract that business. It's the number of rooftops and it's the median household income within a defined area. And as soon as you give those numbers, like a Whole Food 360, within a defined area, they'll give you the exact number, as well as the median household income is going to be $60,000. So in some areas where we want to see more development, we've got to increase rooftops. So we have to have a balance between growth and what it is we expect, and it has to be smart. And at this point, we're going to move right along. And Ms. Pemberton, I want to thank you for your patience. Thank you for being present. I want to thank you for representing Sandstone Estates and bringing folk into compliance out here even. And that being said, you know, you deal with on the front line, and Allison, please go ahead and cue up this presentation, HOAs and how to make them effective. Let's start there. I know you have slides, but that's a very important part of the conversation because, you know, as a general rule, HOAs have the ability to set their own rules and regulations. And I know we have a long list of things.
Absolutely.
Let's start with talking about those, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And before I kind of delve into these slides, I'm going to adjust a bit, just kind of based on the tone and some of the questions that I've seen, and even, you know, some of the things that you spoke about earlier, Commissioner. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure to do this. I'm feeling the need, just kind of based on some of the questions and just how we marry between the association and what an association does with the different offices of the counties. Wanted to kind of back up there and come back and kind of, again, define a community association and its, you know, purpose and its core intent. Community associations were established to provide a communal basis for preserving, maintaining, as well as enhancing the value, you know, of the property. Community associations, they're going to have three defining characteristics in most cases, whatever structural type that you're looking at. And that's going to be one, for community associations, they're going to always be a mandatory and automatic membership. The second defining characteristic is that you're going to have certain documents that are going to outline the rules and regulations of the community. Those documents in itself are going to be able to create the mutual basis and obligation for not only you as an individual homeowner, but also for the association, the entity in itself. HOAs, they are in fact a business. You know, they are registered with the Georgia, you know, with the state of Georgia. In addition to that, in most cases, they are going to be, you know, an incorporation governed by the nonprofit code. At any given point, as Mr. Williams mentioned there about, you know, when neighborhoods are established, those, in terms of a mandatory association, that particular developer who has purchased that land, who's purchased that piece of property, they are going to define, initially there, once it's platted, sometimes they may plat it in phases, all at once, just kind of depending on that developer. They are going to outline those provisions that are going to say or state, hey, if this is a mandatory or deed restricted community, an HOA, a condo community, and that's going to be established by those governing documents, i.e. your covenants and your bylaws that are going to be set up that are attached to that property, again, in that community. So again, you got that mandatory piece, that requirement that's going to extend over. Now, in most cases, those developers, they are going to be there. I've had a few questions I saw about developers here. In terms of that transition and how long a developer can stay, they're going to vary as related in terms of with HOAs as defined in those governing documents. In most cases, it may be a specific amount of time, a certain number of years, or it could be, you know, once a certain number of properties have been sold. Somewhere in there, those defining provisions will be disclosed in terms of now this developer has moved on or is preparing to move on once the neighborhood is built out. And at that point, the members who have purchased in the community that are now part of that mandatory membership, you in fact will go through that process to, if in fact you want to serve, to become an actual board member in that community, all right? And so that process, anything with regard to your organizational structure, how board members operate, how your meetings are called, the entity in itself, how it's actually governed, those are going to be in your bylaws. Your covenants are tied to the land, and that's where you're going to have your more restrictive use regs, because that's going to speak to your rules and your regulations for the community. So that particular document is going to outline, you know, provisions in terms of what those architectural control standards, those community-wide standards look like, the basis for the association and the members to be mandatory and to pay those dues. They're going to call for what those dues may look like and speak to, you know, some of the authorities that the board members may have with regard to how dues are actually raised. All of this is done under the premises and with the purpose, which is the core purpose, you know, of community associations, which is again to manage. We heard those three defining characteristics, but managing the common areas, managing property interest, as well as providing services to owners, and overall, again, looking at how you develop, you know, a level of sense of community with regard to the members throughout in itself. So I wanted to kind of go.
Let me also say, because you guys go a little step above, and this is, you know, the second time I've dealt with a community that we, you know, how we handle things in the way that we do. Because, you know, when people don't pay us, then we go ahead and we file civil action against them.
Absolutely.
We're not playing with you, you know, and especially if it's been 2 years or more. So, you know, speak to that, because, you know, as it relates to your bylaws, whatever you set for your HOA, you have to, some people have to have encouragement, and it's best to have it clearly expressed so that when I come to you, I'm not asking, I'm reminding you that you have an obligation here. And when you fail to adhere to your responsibilities, then people like our HOA management company, they will go down there and file the civil action against them and put a lien. Another thing that I want to point out, when you're buying a home in certain communities, I've dealt with, you know, if it's a mandatory HOA, that real estate agent is going to go to that HOA and they're going to find out where you are. And, you know, as a homeowner, if you buy that house, you're going to have to bring it to a zero balance with that HOA at the time of closing. So HOA, mandatory HOAs can affect closing costs. So speak to those things as well.
Absolutely. Where are you going with that? That's talking all about enforcement and compliance. You know, now you're speaking to whether you are enforcement or compliance as related to failure to pay assessments or failure to maintain property. All of that's tying into the solvency of the association. Looking at the latter with regard to closing, you know, the mortgage industry, you know, when you're looking to close on a home, that is the very first thing that they're going to do in terms of that verification to the association. So things like hey, the association is underfunded. Or it may be you have a situation where you have a lot of absentee owners. You've got, more than a majority of your members, are living offsite and they're renting homes. And because from the mortgage perspective, they look at that as an investment on the loan that they're going to potentially give to an owner to purchase in a neighborhood, that lowered interest rate, when you do in fact have an association that is quote unquote solvent, meaning a healthy reserve, a healthy bank account, active participation with the members in terms of compliance, architectural enforcement, and making sure that those rules and regs are followed, all the way up to, hey, if a member is delinquent, that you are in fact taking those steps to go ahead and recover. In most cases, those documents are going to outline the authorities of the association with regard to, hey, if you can in fact, fine late fees, filing those liens, even all the way up to if you're a matter of the POA, that 16-part statute will outline the authority for the association to actually foreclose on the property. So that would be the ultimate and highest remedy, in terms of enforcing compliance for an association in itself. And, whether as a board of directors or a volunteer leader in your community, making that decision to do those things is vital. It's critical in more ways than one. I saw so many, from there, that involvement. I've heard the take control and partnership. Where that HOA comes into play and your board of directors and marrying between your office, like your zoning or code enforcement or Department of Sanitation, those use restrictions that are outlined in your ordinance, they first begin with the enforcement from the association. You put that pressure there on the members. We work with, in fact, the county code offices and all the varied county offices. Hey, this is not only just a violation of use restrictions in the community, this is a county ordinance or something that's this member is in violation or infraction of as well. So we work between those offices to apply that pressure. So the ultimate goal is to, in fact, achieve compliance and recovery so we can, in fact, preserve that asset. We've got great curb appeal. And, if you're looking to sell your home, you can get the most value. Everything from safety, to neighborhood watch and how you structure those programs and working to, get the members out, sending those correspondences. I think you shared something there a little bit earlier about, getting in the streets and notification, of those things there with regard to street parking. Well, all of these things, ladies and gentlemen, they're tied into those authorities. If your documents, your governing documents are in fact silent on certain provisions, that's even more, for an area for you to be able to draw on your county and look to those relationships to be able to add and assist, because as an association, you can only enforce what the rules and regs are as allowed by your governing documents. If that's not there, you have to look to another process, which is an amendment process, a rewriting, of those documents. And that's something that typically is voted upon by, 2/3 of the membership or whatever that may say in your documents. But equally, if you don't have, any documents at all, if you are just a subdivision that is a volunteer association or civic association where you don't have any use restrictions, from there, that process will look very much like an opt-in. I think I kind of shared something there with a owner on the chat group there. That's a process where those documents that I've referenced, you would be creating those and coming up with those dynamics in terms of what that looks like for the community. And it will be an opt-in or out process through all of those lot owners, in, that particular, neighborhood to buy into that process. So essentially they would have to opt in to agree to be able to be governed by those use restrictions, if that makes a bit of sense, okay? I think you're on mute there.
I'm sorry. One question that I have, because I've seen so many people say that they have that they don't have a mandatory HOA. Mm-hmm. So they're wondering, how far can I go? But is it not possible? You can go from being a voluntary to mandatory, but does it not require a certain amount of votes within the community to do so? Or is there anyone, including you, Mr. Williams, as an attorney, who can speak to how you can go from being voluntary to mandatory so that you have stricter enforcement?
Got it. So it still is very much the establishment of that entity, a entity that is going to serve now as that mandatory body. The thing here is, and in most cases, well, all cases, you're going to have an attorney that's going to actually draft and prepare that, for those particular lot owners. Now, being that it was not originally established, Commissioner, and that this is something you're tempted to do after the fact, because those covenants are tied to the land. In some instances, they have what's known as perpetual duration, which means they're never going to expire once they're in place. So when that's the case and you're attempting to do that, it really does become a process where, hey, you could opt in and your neighbor could not opt in. So you cannot have every other house, that's agreeing to participate now with this voluntary association. And because everyone may not want to. So it really does, that goes tie you right back into neighborly, kind of notifications and community and communal involvement, because you will definitely, as that little core group and neighbors want to get together to look and talk about what those use restrictions are going to be and get that agreement and buy-in ahead, so that you can in fact get them to opt in. In some instances, I've seen them written in ways where members may not want to opt in, and they may do things like, hey, well, as long as you're here, you're not a member. If your deed transfers to a spouse or child, you still don't have to participate. But once it actually sells to anyone outside of that, at that point, that lot is an automatic mandatory member, as a part of what those new use regs have been established. So takes a little bit of work.
I'm sorry, as simple as updating your bylaws to state that you are mandatory. But because I just want to get to the core of this, because I'm having a lot of people ask this question. But once you update those bylaws, if there are people who choose to opt out, because with me, things either we are in or we're out. We need to learn compliance around here, in my opinion. But even with mandatory, you could allow homeowners to opt out who do not want to move to mandatory, until which time the property transfers to a second party.
No. So if in fact that community was already established as a deed restricted community, a PUD, community association, they're called a very, kind of on those names. Once that developer has established it as a mandatory community, it is a mandatory deed restricted community, and every member that purchases inside one of those lots are an automatic member.
Now, and see, but that's easy when it's a new community. But these questions that I'm seeing are from established communities, where they're not getting the participation they want, and they want to go from voluntary to mandatory.
Yeah. So if they're voluntary and wanting to convert to a mandatory, that would be that opt-in process that I shared. And even still, with going through those steps, you still would, could be in a situation where you don't have the entire neighborhood opting in. And so, as a kind of a win-win, so to a degree, you would want to prepare those documents and an opt-in provision in a way that would, attach to any successors or any, future purchasers of the property. But the short answer is in a voluntary association, if an owner is not opting into that, you cannot force them to become a member, of that voluntary that's converting to a mandatory association.
Okay, thanks for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I feel like I'm getting questions that are popping up in here. I don't know if it'll be easier just to kind of go straight into questions. Allison, if you were kind of pitching there, I don't know, Commissioner, if you answer, because I have completely shifted in kind of what I want to cover here and making sure that I'm addressing. But nevertheless, one of the bigger things here is when you're thinking about your in a mandatory HOA or condo association, there is very much a hierarchy with regard to you have your governing documents, and then you also have to be cognizant in terms of where your local municipalities come into play, your state legislation, as well as any federal laws or restrictions that may come, because you're going to be looking at that point, whatever is more restrictive. So, and that's where you really want to rely just on that kind of professional insight and support with helping there. And again, having those great relationship with your county and agencies, your local municipalities, you guys are great for doing this, but that's where it comes into play. So if you're doing things like, wanting your documents say, you can tow a vehicle, but in knowing that if your community is not gated and you don't own everything on the other side of that gate, that is a public street, how do you do that? It's a local, county ordinances where you have to, partner with that tow company, have specific signage out, and even still to that effect, is it really enforceable, if you're not obstructing ingress or egress to a property or abandoned vehicle. So having those relationships with the county, with the partnerships are essential. You definitely want to invoke your right as a member. And you know what, now, Allison, let's go ahead and throw up that if you would, the governance slide there. Just in kind of pointing out some highlights here, if in fact we have any volunteer leaders on the line, from, again, and considering, kind of 12 key points, and you can kind of scroll down a little bit and just kind of getting to the heart of some principles here that will, in fact, just for all board members in terms of just some general compliances that you will see unilaterally in all of your bylaws, documents, the right, as that board members and those leaderships having those annual meetings, again, whatever that looks like per your documents, however that frequency is outlined, again, looking in those bylaws, the assessments, collecting those assessments and fees from homeowners in a timely and equitable manner, no selective enforcement. Again, what applies to one applies to all. Regular forms of communication, conflicts of interest, how do you handle that? Disclosing, if in fact you're serving on a board role in that seat, if in fact, you're bringing, or recommending a vendor or contractor to the table, any potential conflicts, making sure that that is put out there, and then you are in fact abstaining if necessary from with regard to any votes. Holding open and fair elections. You cannot just be remissive in terms of your documents are calling for whatever those terms may be and looking like for those seats, to hold and open those fair elections. I know sometimes it gets very discouraging where you're not meeting quorums and you're getting the same people who may come to the meetings, but and some members, board members may want to just stop having the meeting. Well, that's that you can't do that from a legal basis. You have to do that. Financial transparency, making sure that things that members have the right to, equally, you are presenting and sharing that information. So members have the right to know what those financial look like and where the money is going, and the right to request and look and inspect records, as outlined per the nonprofit code, but without breach of anything confidentiality. There's a very clear, if you want to scroll back up there for me, Allison, a clear separation between as a board member. So it's very important that in a deed restricted community to invoke and utilize your right, your responsibility to participate in those meetings, to understand what is happening with the association. So just like in any democracy here, if you're not happy with the governing bodies that are in place, the bylaws are going to give you very specific steps and details and things that you should do and can do to remove those board members, or to, if you in fact want to serve, how to actually serve. Because these things here are these kind of 12 points, governance and the law, managing that community, as applicable to your use regulation, and knowing the documents. As board members, you must know and review your documents, and that can come by way of training, working with your attorney, participating in events like this, however you may, get access. Grievances and appeals. Residents members, you have that process. You are afforded that process to go back and have hearings with your board members to, repeal if it's a budget that was put out and, you're not happy with that, or dues increase, what that looks like. Got to understand that piece. And board members have to afford for that. The records, making sure the records, and a lot of times this is where, as managing agent, because you see here just kind of going through, it's a lot. you know, if you're talking about from a legal liability perspective and just understanding, and this has a tendency to maybe shy away just a lot of volunteers. But again, when you lean on your local, you know, support or professional management or licensed agents, all licensed agents, again, I think that popped up, have to be governed by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. You have to be licensed to, in fact, do property management, HOA and condo management. And that's, you know, nowhere around it. And you see there going down reserve funding, just making sure that they're being good stewards and accounting for what's going to look like with that strategic plan, 2 or 3 years. How are we going to enhance the property? Those requests that are coming from the members, and really working and putting, you know, a roadmap into place in terms of how you're going to get there. And you see there, you know, again, enforcing those rules, a very, very important, you know, responsibility there. But let's go to the rights and responsibility chart, if you would, for me, please, Allison. On the flip side of that, here, because I don't want to, it can often get, you know, hey, you know, the board members have all of this power, these authorities, and it comes down in most cases, in some cases, to subjectivity, interpretation, and members can get really discouraged and not want to participate. And that is one thing that we really, really try to get away from, you know, making sure that it's essential that, you know, if you kind of scroll up for me here, as a homeowner, again, you have the right to, you know, responsive or competent actual, you know, association that's operating in alignment with what those documents say. You deserve, you know, fair, open, honest treatment. I just kind of highlighted some key areas here. And again, participating in that governing process, whether you are current or delinquent, you still have the right to participate and know what's actually happening. And ultimately, the goal here is to live in an association, a community that things are happening according to the processes and procedures that have been identified, okay? On the flip side of that, you have that responsibility too. Scrolling down here, you know, equally also read and know your governing documents, know what you know, things that you are charged to be responsible for, maintaining your in according to those specifications. You have the responsibility to vote. You know, we want you to come in and vote and you know, put your part in terms of what that looks like or what may be presented. You can request, you know, reconsideration for things that affect you personally. You know, if it's an architectural fine violation, or if it's some hardship, variances, there are always provisions for variances that are issued, that are written there, and that can be done. It's just a matter of invoking on you know, your ability to utilize that. Flip side, looking at community leaders, those board members and serving, they equally the right to expect you to pay those dues and honor those obligations and comply with those rules and regulations. And, you know, they have the right to expect a certain level of, when you are doing those meetings, you know, being in a very constructive and positive atmosphere and allowing them to take place, because if the meetings are dysfunctional, nothing is accomplished, you know, and I'm definitely pro proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you are in fact putting out as a board leader in the community, how you're disclosing that information and not operating with, you know, a level of ambiguity. If you go back up here, scroll back up for me, Allison, here, and I'll try to round up here to get to questions, but the main responsibilities here, and we'll be able to share this as well, Commissioner, if we need to send this out. Those responsibilities as a board leader, volunteer leader in that aspect, you are fiduciarily required to exercise with a level of discretion in a manner that is to be in the best interest of the entire community. No subjectivity, no selective enforcement, no, you know, hey, this is, you know, want to do favors for my neighbor. Everything has to happen in a way that is open and fair to everyone in the neighborhood when those decisions are being made. You have to, you know, in that leadership role, again, I can't scream enough, and understanding those documents, have just kind of, you know, highlighted here a few, and conducting business in an open forum, an open manner. Again, Robert's Rules of Order, understanding what that means and how those decisions are made. So in fact, you do not give that appearance of hey, there is something murky happening here. We often see litigation, case study from nationwide, internationally, of just different instances of things that happen in association living, you know, from board members. There are provisions available to you. And so you don't be remissive of that. In that leadership role, these are the things that you are required and have that responsibility to do. Denying member access, not, you know, wanting to hear, you know, from a member's request, trying to generate unenforceable rules. You know, you can only execute and enforce based on the authorities that are written and recorded in your governing documents. These documents should be made available to you. If not, they are public record. They're recorded, you know, in the county land records, and they are open, available, again, for anyone to be able to access. You know, in terms of that constructive notice, by virtue that they're recorded there, you can get access, you know, to that information, okay? And I wanna kind of stop there, and I think we've all are out of whack on time, but I would love the opportunity to just entertain any specific questions, Commissioner, and follow at your directives.
Well, what we're going to do, and this always happens when we get together, we tend to run over on time. So what we'll do is send out a transcript of the conversation. There was a question as to the name of your organization, and that's PO Solutions. And also Mr. Frierson, and thank you so much, Mr. Frierson, for joining us, Ms. O'Neill. The Georgia HOA Alliance is a wonderful organization to gather material from. So what we will do is just follow up with an email to everyone that has participated that has a toolkit of resources, so to speak, and any specific questions that are a part of the transcript, Ms. Pemberton, just, you know, I would ask, because I know you to be a professional and responsive person, you to address those questions. And we will also seek to do the same. One of the things, pay piles. I saw someone ask that question, and I must answer that because I deal with it all the time. If you sit large articles on the side of the road, if you cut a great deal, it's your brush day, and you just cut every bit of brush down and you sit it on the sidewalk, those are paid piles. We don't just come and during the normal course of business do a pickup. So if you'll go to the DeKalb County GA.gov website and click on sanitation, you will see a link for a pay pile. And as soon as you enter the information, then that will begin you in queue to get someone out there in a perfect world in 3 days to do a pickup on that pile, because that gives a lot of confusion. They cut debris and leave it on the side of the road. They call and say, well, my grass has turned brown. Nobody's been by to get it. And they pass by in this truck every day and don't pick it up. Well, that's because it's a large pile and you have to report that in order for us to pick it up. Now, in a perfect world, we should, you know, I've advocated door hangers should be left or put in the mailbox saying this is a large pile, please call or go online to schedule a pickup. But that is your responsibility. If you have a large pile, we just don't pick those up during the normal course of business. You know, with that said, I'd like to say, Mr. Hammonds, as always, I appreciate you. I thank you for, and all of the community members, many of you that are on this call are some of the most active folk in DeKalb County. And, you know, it gives me great pleasure and great optimism because I do feel that there's a new DeKalb that is on the horizon. You know, we've come together in ways I believe it's unprecedented, and we're really taking control of community. There is a cost for that paid PayPal. I saw that question out of the corner of my eye. But again, us taking ownership of our communities is very important. Through your HOA, or even if you don't have an organized HOA, knowing how to reach out to Mr. Tim Hardy, or just reaching out to me. Every day I track emails that come in concerning some form of code violation. And I'd like to thank everyone on the call for their service. You know, Major Banks, Officer Tyson, thank you so much. Mr. Williams, who's one of the smartest young minds in DeKalb. I always enjoy working with you. You're always thorough in what you do, and I appreciate that. Ms. Pemberton, thank you for what you do. You got in here, you get this money, and that's at the end of the day, that allows you to make a difference because, through those HOA dollars, we can do things like during the holidays and seasons when you have high crime, we put officers out front to patrol for our community. And we're just grateful for what you do. And at this time, we are going to, as they say in the Southern Baptist Church, with all hearts and minds clear, we will disconnect. But again, thank you all for joining us and being so responsive to us. It's always humbling when I have these town halls to see you guys come out and support. And may God bless each and every one of you. And Allison, I'll turn it over to you from there.
It's Leah Davis. I just have a quick announcement, just a quick recognition to attorneys who are on the call from District Attorney's Office who are strategically located in the district, and they wanted to listen in today to be able to glean the information and also to understand some of the issues. So we just wanted to recognize them, and that will be attorneys Angel Riley, Gerara Mars, and Christopher Carter. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, and it is a trifecta in terms of once, a code violation is cited, then there's the right to remediate. Then when remediation doesn't happen, we move it into court. And then from there, our judges and court personnel can levy fines and or imprisonment. And, we've really taken a hard stand on individuals who fail to upkeep their property. That's just something we shouldn't have to live next door to. So I'm very sympathetic because I don't want anyone dealing with anything I don't want to deal with. And you shouldn't have to look next door and see such things. So again, I look forward to us getting back to normal. I look forward to us beginning demolitions because we have an entire roster of properties that need to go. Plain and simply. And I look forward to that land bank operating at optimal levels so that we can take these dilapidated properties that have been abated and get them back on tax rolls and or sell that land so it can be put into productive use. So thanks so much. And again, we're always here to serve you. And Lance, is it your birthday today?
Absolutely.
Well, I didn't mean to startle you, but happy birthday to you. Frida sort of made mention of it. So go and enjoy your birthday. That is something I would do on mine. So you get off this call and go and enjoy your birthday, Lance. And thank you again to everyone who came out to join us this evening.
That's okay, downstairs.
Thank you.